There you go.
Okay. Well, here we are on Romans 13, brand new chapter. Chapter 12 was really good. Actually, a lot of it's really good. Verses 1 to 7. Under God's authority, when we were young, many, many light years ago, we wanted to rebel against those who had authority over us.
Yes, it did.
Let's face it, when we were growing up, we couldn't wait to be on our own and be free.
Be in charge.
We were under the mistaken impression that once we left our parents' home, we could do as we pleased. Boy, were we in for a big surprise. All we did was to exchange the house rules at home for those of the world that we live in. That's the coffee maker. Verse 1 of chapter 13 makes it clear that everyone must submit himself, I might say, or herself, to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except that which God has established. So when we speak of the government and the ruling authorities, whether it's the local government or the state government or even the federal government, we tend to, most of the time, have something negative to say. Except that it's until you read something like this that God has established the authority. God has established, not because he thought they were going to be such great rulers and leaders, but he's the one that established that authority. For these people that Paul's writing this to, so these, by the way, are, just to reiterate, these are Christians, some of them probably pretty baby Christians, nonetheless, and they're living in Rome. I don't know what that is I can't remember what that is in San Francisco. There's that Tenderloin district. It would be like being a Christian and living in the center of the most debauchery and whatever that's going on. For these people that were living under Roman rule, this must have been hard to accept.
Yeah. And Nero was the emperor at the time.
He was one of them, that's for sure.
At this time.
They were treated harshly by the pagan rulers and soldiers. The Romans hated the Jews, and they delighted in tormenting them. But Paul was teaching them to place themselves under their authority. Well, we'll see there's more to this than what meets the eye. Where the Jews had their problem is where we today have our problem. Being under the authority of a governing body that we respect for their fairness and justice is one thing, but that seldom happens. But Paul wants us to change our viewpoint and believe that no authority exists outside of God's will. So if we say to ourselves, okay, God is perfectly in control, he's sovereign over his creation, so what's up with these people that he's left? Remember the Pharisees, they were authorities that God designated as being over his people Israel, and they certainly weren't doing the world's best job either. I would say that for the most part, most of the authority, because they're human, we're not happy with. because they live, so, not always, but according to their flesh. So sometimes they're greedy for more power. Maybe they're greedy to line their nests to get as much money out of the position that they're in. That's why they don't want to give up the power.
Somebody once said that, we get the government that we deserve.
Or perhaps we get a government that's going to cause us to depend more totally on God.
Good one.
So when we disobey civil authority, who are we really disobeying?
God.
Yep, we're disobeying. Yep, we're disobeying God Himself.
Because He put them in charge, knowing what they were going to do.
Yep. And if you choose to rebel, be prepared. You will bring judgment on yourself.
I can attest to that.
So you can say, I don't like, favorite, no, a favorite saying is, it's a conspiracy. It's like they're all out to get me. It's because I look like a skinhead or whatever it is.
On the same
No, I should.
token, those who are in that authority are rebelling against God when they don't follow His will.
Yeah.
So it is a double-edged
That
sword.
it sure is.
It's not,
That's right, it is, that's a good saying, a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it is.
Paul wants his readers to know that the rulers aren't to be feared by those who obey. Isn't that correct? I mean, you don't have to worry about the police pulling you over if you're obeying the traffic laws, if all your lights are working and you made a stop,
In
the stop
theory,
sign.
in
In theory, yes,
And you
in
have
theory.
insurance, and you have a
yeah.
driver's
Assuming
license.
you're doing what you're doing,
Yeah.
it should.
But the people that need to fear are the people that are rebelling against the authority. In a perfect world, okay, so we need to say this because we know this has got to fit into this storyline somewhere. For we know then that in a perfect world we would have a godly government with ideal rulers. But when civil rulers overstep their proper function, so when the chief of police, the governor, whoever it is, when they overstep their power and position to do what they want to do and not what's best for the people. The Christians are to obey God rather than man. And there are such wonderful biblical examples of that
Daniel.
where they, yeah, oh yeah. And even the apostles that were hauled in for preaching in the temple.
Yeah, Paul.
Joseph and Mary, when they left their country and went to Egypt,
Stephen.
Yeah.
Against bad authority.
Yeah, they said, and I think the words actually, when they were questioned, weren't you told not to preach in His name, in the name of Jesus? And they said, yes, you did tell us that. But we find that it's better to obey God than to obey man, and that's exactly what's being said
And
here.
that's what scares the enemy about real Christians. is
Mhm.
that when that push comes to shove, they're going to make that stand.
For we know then that the ruler, whatever that ruler is God's servant to bring about the good of the general public by maintaining good order. So, in theory, the idea is that if you didn't have a ruler, defund the police. Okay, what happened? When the police are taken away, there's anarchy. there's no control, there's no good order, there's nobody getting arrested for crimes.
And there's lots of news coverage.
And yeah, and absolutely, and that makes for good headlines. So there's a reason why they're supposed to be there. And when you take those away, then people do what people do. And criminals do what criminals do. They take advantage of the situation. No bail, they kick them right back out on the street again, and they're out there wreaking havoc on the public. Paul tells us what will happen when we do wrong under the ruler's watch, his observation. But if, this is verse 4, but if you do wrong, what's it say?
Be afraid.
Be afraid, for he does not bear the sword for nothing. In other words, he's in the position to cause you to demand that you obey the law. And he's got the muscle behind it. Find yourself in jail if you push
He will
the
orchestrate your circumstances to the exact lesson that he has intended for you to learn, with or without your
cooperation. Yeah. But if you do wrong, be afraid.
But when you obey, it will get better.
Yeah. Yep. God's servant not only is there for the good, but to be an agent of wrath. So he's not only there to establish a climate of that will cause people to be obedient and observe the law and whatever, but for those who completely are always just pushing the button.
That won't meet the wrath of Samuel.
Yes. But to be the agent of wrath, to bring punishment on the wrongdoer, verse 4. The source of power for all rulers, the source of power for all rulers is God. They may think that they get it, whatever. They may say, well, I'm under the mandate. I was duly elected by the people. The people and the Constitution have given me the power to do. Well, guess what? If God didn't want you to be in power, you would not be in power.
Amen.
Whether it's an aneurysm or whether it's an assassination or whatever it is.
Nebuchadnezzar learned that real quick too.
Yeah, sure did.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, since you brought up Nebuchadnezzar, who was king of Babylon.
That's the fun of the spell.
You find yourself saying, well, he destroyed Jerusalem, but he carted away everything of value, took all of the best and the brightest, and that's how Daniel and the other guys, that's how they ended up in Babylon, because they were the brightest, the youngest.
Far greater than
Yeah, the really, really old, and they were left to take care of whatever was growing in the fields.
They were magi, weren't they? They had to study that very well educated.
So, because of all he has just said, because of all that Paul's been saying, it's necessary to submit to the authorities, not only because of the possible punishment. So you can say, my reason, my motive, this is what I was looking for. My motive for obeying the law is so that I won't be punished. But that's not the only reason. I mean, there's verse 5 says, but also because of conscience. Our conscience, if we're a believer, our conscience should be bothering us. when we're rebelling against those authorities. So it's not just I mean, even the most pagan person is gonna, if you've got a strong, long arm of the law, that's gonna take you out behind the building and get a confession out of you, then that's one thing to fear. But if your conscience is also bothering you, then that's something that hopefully we would listen to. I'm sure that the Roman Christians needed to hear this message just as we do today, because we need to be reminded of this. People will say, well, when there's a good Christian leader, when there's a good this and that, then I'll obey. But until that time, I'm going to do what I want to do.
There's a good Christian leader.
Yeah. There have been. It's interesting because Jimmy Carter was a self-proclaimed born-again Christian, but he was a terrible president in terms of doing what the president should do for the country.
And there's a trend with that, between the 45 and 1.
Yeah. I'm sure, be obedient. When we were singing that song, Trust and Obey. Be obedient and you will have nothing to fear.
Sure.
But if you rebel, you will suffer God's wrath through or by way of his servant. Unless you live in one of these states where nobody holds you accountable. To keep our conscience clear, we need to honor those whom God has installed as his representatives, because that's really what it is. They are God's representative on earth. Now, what does that mean? I think that would mean that God is going to reprimand his servants when they get out of line. He's going to hold them accountable for what they're doing. It's not our job.
The places Babylon were agents of God in the sense that they were carrying out God's wrath through them, even though they were God's enemies. And that's what he means when I will use all things for good.
Sure.
For, these guys intended it for good, but this is the consequence that comes from that disobedience. And they carry out his without their knowing a lot of the times.
I'm sure.
As Hitler and all these other guys did.
Now, Paul brings up a touchy subject. This is in verse 6. Talks about taxes. I remember.
I pay 40% tax.
When I remember in my youth, I remember hearing of people who did not believe that taxes were legal, that they shouldn't be. We're talking about income tax. Sales tax, another story.
I agree with you.
And yet, the more I've read through the Bible, I've realized that there have been taxes forever.
That's it. They tried to trap Jesus with that one, right?
Yeah.
When they're under Caesar's was.
Yep.
Is it lawful to pay taxes?
There are many who refuse to pay, or they try to cheat the government out of what they're due. But Paul speaks up and says, this is also why you pay taxes. For the authorities are God's servants who give their full time, in other words, this isn't a sideline for them, their full time to governing. So part of the reason for the taxes is to compensate the rulers for spending every day, and of course we know how this doesn't always play out, but the idea is that they're compensated for what they're spending their full-time effort at governing. Once again, there has been and will always be dishonest members of government who are only after their own personal gain. I think it's been a long time since the first president, who was the first president of the United States?
George Washington.
We're taught that it's George Washington.
Yes, we're taught that. George Washington didn't get paid a dime. Well, probably didn't have dimes then. But he didn't get paid
Bushels.
anything for being president. So, was he in it? He wasn't in it for the money, obviously.
But he did get a lot of ice cream.
That's true. But did he finally get a new coat of shellac on his teeth, or I don't know what it was? But
Yeah, wouldn't he?
No, wouldn't he?
that's why I said shellac. Gotta keep up with me here.
Okay, you're too
Mr.
swift for
President,
me.
you have a splinter in your number 27.
Yes.
You have
Do you think that God will not discipline his own servants? Yeah, of course he's going to discipline.
the ones he loves.
It is his obligation to chastise them when they do wrong. We started to say that today, in contrast, we have governmental leaders, and even down to the lowest positions in the local government, and they puff out their chest, put their chin in the air, which makes it easier for you to look down your nose at the other people, and you say, I'm the county judge. I'm here to tell you this is the way things are going to be. I remember the time that I found out that the local representatives, I don't remember the number of years, they had to be in office for a number of years in order to get retirement benefits. So you wonder, this is a thankless job. Why are you pushing to get reelected each year? Well, that's the reason why.
I like their titles, man.
It's the thing, it's the power, it's the prestige, but it's also the fact that after a certain number of years, you're going to get the retirement benefits, and they're going to be good retirement benefits. So we have to question what the agenda is of the people that we put into office. If a servant knew that he or she was God's servant, I believe they would think long and hard before cheating God. At least they should.
Oh, yeah.
You should be really afraid. You think you're afraid of the power that the local government officials and the police have. How about cheating God and seeing how that works out for you?
I will never forget the first time I knew that I really grieved the Holy Spirit. I just made sergeant in the military, and I'd never felt so low in my life. And it was one of those shames that you can't hide from, because you can't hide from that look.
You can't hide from God.
In the end, Paul gives this advice. This is verse 7. Give everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. I haven't found an easy definition of revenue. I mean, I know what revenue can be, but
Pay out for employees, maybe?
Yeah, maybe like
Wages?
if you yeah, all right. Let's go with that, because I think that sounds good too. If your employees need to be paid and you're cheating them, you need to, and by the way, that goes back to biblical times too.
Yeah.
The rich were always shortchanging the poor working person.
Wait, you mean greed's been around as long as man has?
Absolutely.
No way.
I wonder how we can make the connection. If respect is demanded, then respect. If honor, then give that person the honor that's due them. Keep a short list of what you owe someone. Pay off your personal debts as quickly as possible. Remember that your actions act as a testimony to your Christian life. So if you owe somebody something, don't just put it out of your mind and say, well, someday, somehow, some bright and shiny day, I'll pay this person back. No. Pay off your personal debts as quickly as possible. That way, when you see them in the grocery store, you don't have to pull one of these.
I also learned that turning the other cheek doesn't mean showing your whole rear end.
Okay, good.
That's the wrong sheet.
Okay. All right, Mr. Teehee.